Medieval people did not have an appreciation for good food, ate bland, gross things all the time. There's 5 reasons why food sucked in medieval times. No. 1. Salt was expensive. So if you were a poor medieval peasant, you probably didn't get much of it in your diet at all. Your food would be boiled in unsalted water, making it tasteless. Medieval people did not have paper towels or napkins, so they used their sleeves or a piece of bread to wipe their hands after using the bathroom. During the Middle Ages, beer was the most popular drink. Wine was also common, but it was expensive. So who drank the most alcohol? Well, the poor people did. They drank a type of beer that was brewed with wheat. This beer was extremely strong, like 20% alcohol. The higher percentage was necessary because water was unsafe to drink. So by drinking this beer, they were actually disinfecting themselves from the germs in the water. Then they'd use those same hands to serve themselves food. But do you know why spices were so hard to find? It's because medieval Europe was in the Middle Ages, and during this time, people were not traveling by airplane. They traveled by foot or by horse, and the roads were terrible, so it took months to get anywhere. For example, if someone wanted to get from France to Italy, they would have to walk across the Alps mountain range. That journey alone could take 2 weeks. Now imagine trying to carry spices over such a long distance. It was much easier for medieval Europeans to trade with people close by, so they developed a taste for bland food. But once in a while, someone would come into town that traveled from the east. It's like from India or China, and they'd bring all sorts of exotic flavors with them. These men were called spice merchants. When they came to town, it was a big deal because they carried silk, cinnamon, cloves, ginger, nutmeg, and pepper. These were all very rare spices during medieval times. But when the spice merchant arrived, everyone wanted to buy his goods. This made the spice merchant very rich, but he didn't make that much money selling spices in Europe. He actually sold most of his spices in the Middle East. They also didn't have soap, so they'd wash their hands in cold water and then dry them on their dirty clothes. Those germs could then spread to other people through the serving dishes. Another way that germs spread was through sharing. It was common for medieval families to share their food with other people, especially during the harvest season. They also shared food with beggars and the poor. But the problem was, they didn't know that they were spreading sickness this way. The only way to make it more flavorful was to add something like vinegar or pepper. But those things were also expensive. So what did most medieval peasants eat? They ate a lot of root vegetables, like carrots, parsnips, onions, leeks, and potatoes. When meat was available, they preferred the cheaper cuts of meat, like the feet, down the hands and the organs. Yum. Wheat and barley were the most common grains eaten, but those were often just boiled or ground into a type of flour. In fact, during the Middle Ages, the peasant diet consisted mostly of boiled foods, because boiling was the only cooking method that was available to them. Medieval peasants didn't even have an oven or a grill. They also didn't have refrigeration, so they couldn't store their food for very long. If they were lucky enough to own a small animal like a chicken, they might use its eggs to preserve some of their meat by salting it and then stuffing it inside the chicken. Then they de-stuff the chicken with even more salt and bury it in the ground to keep it fresh. Now moving on to the second reason why food was so bad in medieval times. Food preparation was dangerous. It wasn't uncommon for people to cut off their fingers or, even worse, while preparing their food. The tools used in cooking were typically made of very sharp metal and were extremely dangerous to use. And because medieval people had no understanding of germs or bacteria, they wouldn't wash their hands before handling food. Also, medieval kitchens were usually filled with all sorts of animals. You'd see rats, roaches, flies, and even stray dogs. This made food preparation even more unsanitary. And because the average life expectancy in medieval times was around 35 years old, many people thought it was just a fact of life that you got sick from eating, so they just didn't think twice about it. The third reason is that the serving dishes were filthy. Reason no? For alcohol was often in short supply. Finally, the fifth reason why food was so bad in medieval times. Spices were hard to come by. So basically, most foods tasted bland. Okay, thanks for watching, bye.